Hello and welcome to another Unleash webcast. I'm George LaRocque, the SVP of Insights here at Unleash, and I want to thank you all for sharing a part of your day with us for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Eightfold AI. Get the most out of your cloud-based ATS with deep learning artificial intelligence. And we'll learn more about Eightfold today and get to meet our distinguished panelists in just a moment. But first, I'd like to review a little bit of housekeeping with you. First and foremost, please use the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation, and feel free to engage with us there. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. If you wouldn't mind sharing where you're logging in from, we tend to have a global audience, and tell us a little bit about yourselves, your company, and what's interesting to you about this topic. That would be outstanding and set some of the context for the day. You'll find access to the chat in the top right part of the interface. Also, right next to chat, you'll find a questions tab. There's no better time than the present, and I'll reinforce this throughout the presentation today. There's no better time than right now to submit your questions. We will be doing a question and answer with the panelists at the end of the presentation. And we will pull some of your questions from chat if some interesting topics come up as well, and we'll review them and cover as many as we can there. Also, this presentation will be available on demand with a summary article at unleashgroup.co. Sorry about that. This presentation will be available on demand at unleashgroup.co after the presentation is concluded. That being said, I would like to begin by introducing our panelists and actually allowing them to introduce themselves. First up, Ashish, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and Eightfold to the audience.
I'm Ashish, Principal for Talent Transformation at Eightfold. I also happen to be a former customer of Eightfold and have used the platform for almost 4 years now. I've seen the goodness come out of the platform, and hence I am here as a part of the organization working with global customers in terms of transforming the talent in their organizations and get a whole lot of great results and outcomes for their business. So Eightfold's Talent Intelligence Suite is based on patented deep learning, machine learning technology, which has been designed by folks who are considered as the foremost in terms of expertise at a global level in this technology, having background in Google and Facebook. With more than 100 enterprise and government customers across 4 continents, and having this technology available in 13 different languages is just the starting point of what Eightfold can do for you.
Thank you, Ashish. It's great to have you here. I know that you do have a background as a thought leader and practitioner in the space, and really looking forward to your insights today. And then also joining us is Melanie Ikove from State Auto. Melanie, would you mind telling everyone a little bit about yourself and State Auto?
Yeah, George. Hi, my name is Melanie Ikove. It's an honor to be here beside Ashish and George. My company, State Auto, we are so excited to celebrate our 100th year anniversary this year. Our company markets personal and business insurance. We do over $2.1 billion in revenue. We house about 2,000 associates, and we anticipate a growth rate of about 15 to 20% year over year. We hire for positions in claims, technology, customer service, and personal and commercial lines.
Great, thank you. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Now, many of the Unleash audience know me, some may not. As the SVP of Insights here at Unleash, driving a lot of our strategy around these conversations. But what you may or may not know is I've been in the industry for 30 years. I spent 10 years as a practitioner coming through talent and HR, and then 10 years on the vendor side launching some of the bigger brands in the talent acquisition space, Brass Ring, Telemetry, Bullhorn in the staffing space. So I know a little bit about ATSs and the value that they bring to the market. And then the last 10 years, I've been working as an analyst and advisor in this space. So I'm really looking forward to learning from both of you today and sharing. And let's get right into it. So one of the first things we wanted to do was establish the goals that talent acquisition leaders are focused on. And there's a lot of data about, there are a variety of goals that you may have as a talent acquisition leader, but these three tend to come up when we look at research from firms like Gartner, like Aptitude Research, work that I've done with HR Wins, and you can see them here. So they're not in any particular order, they're not ranked, but first we've got, doing more with less. And, there was a really interesting stat that I had seen from Aptitude Research, who I've done a lot of work with, that, pre-COVID, talent acquisition budgets, 64% of talent acquisition budgets were increasing. Post-COVID, only 24% of budgets are increasing. So it's certainly a thing. And then diversity, equity, and inclusion and its impact on recruiting. 95% of companies, and the most recent talent acquisition study that we had done with HR Wins, were focused on reducing unconscious bias in the recruiting process. That's a big number. It's pretty much everyone is thinking about this. And then the third, experience, talent experience, both on the candidate side and the hiring teams and hiring managers. Experience has been a topic we've been focused on in talent acquisition for a really long time. And while we've had incremental improvements, I don't know that we've really achieved success there. So I just wanted to frame each of those. And I'm really curious, Melanie, I'll start with you. Does this align with your experience, with your goals, with State Auto's goals, or would you add anything or add to that?
Yeah, I would say you nailed it, George. These are the exact things that we're looking at this year. We're looking for efficiency gains and automation. Our hiring managers only have so much time in a day, and we're looking for ways to help them reach their peak performance. Same with DE&I. It's something we are committed to as a company, and the AI provides increased possibilities for a broader candidate pool and bias mitigation throughout the selection process. And like you said, candidate experience is important to us, not only for candidates, but for our hiring teams, and a way for us to put out a more thoughtfully branded candidate experience and career site for them. So these are definitely aligned with us this year.
And Melanie, how do you see these goals aligning with your ATS?
Yeah, so the ATS, we have Workday. It's great at what it does, but there are limitations. So these goals are not backed by our ATS. The ATS does have a valuable place in our tech stack. It's a great system of record. It's great for processing transactions and data intake and storage, but the efficiency gains are just not there. And so that's why we look for AI and Eightfold to help us really mark our goals this year.
Okay, and I know we're going to dig in on each of these and a lot of the how and the what you're doing. So, but I want to move on to Ashish and think about that Eightfold and the customer base and your peers. How does this relate to what you're hearing in the market, Ashish?
Here is how I would like to sum it up, saying that let's delve a little bit deeper into the stated and unstated needs of various personas that we live in our professional lives. So I could have played the role of employee, a recruiter, a candidate who's applying for a role, whether internal or external. I could have been a hiring manager, a manager of managers. I could have been an interview panelist or a function head. And all of these rolled into one. Now for each persona, we have a different requirement from our ATS or HRMS systems. And with folks getting a really digital experience in the external world today, HR systems are now starting to move in that direction. You ask millennials as to what is their expectation, and they would say that HR folks, and our systems and processes are archaic, right? This is one area that a lot of organizations are focusing on, and I'm sure in the coming years will take it to the next level.
Okay, it's good to step back like that. And it's interesting because we have been at this for a while. So, I think there's um, ATS is one of those HR technologies that it gets picked on a lot, but it as to Melanie's point, and it does do some things, very well, but it can't do everything well. So I think there are a lot of ATSs out there. Some are a little more archaic than others. But Melanie, I'd like to come back to you for a moment. You mentioned that you're using Workday, which is very popular, especially companies of your size and in what we like to call the enterprise space. Where do you see the value of the ATS in your environment?
Yeah, like I said, we do have Workday and we do see a great value in it. It does have a place in our hearts and our tech stack. We use it for a lot of cross-functional items, HCM, finance, payroll, learning, absence, compensation, benefits, and recruiting. So it does have a large place at our company. It is great at data storage. It's a good system of record. It's there to process our day-to-day transactions and help keep things running, and that it does very well. I would say the lacking is the forward-looking items. So looking into our goals this year and trying to accomplish those, there are some items where it does lack.
Yeah. So that sort of system of record and driving those transactions, Ashish, I know I know Workday is a system that you integrate to. What are some other use cases that you see for ATSs across your Eightfold customer base?
So, George, I feel the way Melanie described the various integrations that an ATS is able to achieve, they are absolutely true. And in today's, let me take this again. In today's world, it becomes important for an organization to have a robust system of keeping their data records and compliances and whatever is needed to run their business smoothly and safely. So these are really required. And on top of it, when we say that Eightfold integrates extremely well with many of the well-known and renowned brands like Workday, SuccessFactors, Taleo, Greenhouse, etc. These definitely are required at the back end, as like Melanie said, as a system of record that can make sure that your processes are smooth and compliant.
Yeah, and having I mentioned some of my background, and being there when many of those systems were launched. The ATS was really always meant to be a system of record and a system of compliance, as you've both stated. Core workflow tracking and compliance really drove a lot of the decisions to invest in these ATSs from the customer side. And when you build a platform, it's you're going to do a few things really well, but you're not going to do everything really well. So the needs of the organization are much broader. And when we look at those, we come back to those goals. Compliance is a huge need. Having a system of record and good, clean data is a massive need. But there's a lot more required for an effective talent acquisition and talent management strategy. And so now, we've sort of established what the ATS does well, and that there are some shortcomings looking at the bigger picture. Let's move into how the ATS and AI can work together and what those opportunities are. I think what for me, what this chart shows is, on the left, the ATS really feeding AI with the talent profiles and processes and workflow. And in your case, Melanie, you're using Workday, so your HRIS is also housing your ATS. I know there are different features and functions, but you've got one platform approach there, and you may be pulling some public data in as well, and then feeding the learning that then presents itself through automation and through the AI to the users. So that's what I see here. But I'm curious, Melanie, can you share what I'd like to get a little deeper first on what your hiring environment looks like, and how you're using AI with your ATS right now. But let's start with the kind of hiring that you're doing and the volumes and what the recruiting landscape looks like internally.
Yeah, George, for a little bit of background, we hire approximately 300 to 350 new hires per year across all lines of business. We hire, both exempt, non-exempt, full-time, part-time, as well as interns throughout the year. Now, this is a point where we are a bit uniquely positioned. We currently have 0 recruiters, 0 sourcers, and 0 schedulers.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is definitely not the norm out there. We are relying on our tech stack and the AI's deep learning capabilities to help us continue our growth plan. And our hiring managers are doing all of the recruiting related functions. And as you can imagine, they are beyond excited to have the assistance of Eightfold to help them with that. So we see it, just as you described, this AI sits on top of our ATS that houses all of our data. The AI goes in, uses their deep learning, and really brings everything to the surface for our managers to see quickly and clearly.
Wow, that is not the norm out there, and I think it's I can imagine the questions that will come up if as we continue the conversation, and so. While I see great momentum here, so a survey we did during COVID showed that 64% of talent acquisition leaders are investing in AI and automation, and 44% of those are increasing their investment this year versus what they invested last year. So I'm curious, Ashish, when you listen to Melanie talk about that environment, what does the average Eightfold customer look like, or how does that play out in your customer base? I imagine she's one of the or State Auto is one of the few environments that has no recruiters.
So George, I simply can't stop gushing over this thought that Melanie and State Auto, you guys have really evolved. You have gone to the next level. And I must admit that we do have a small recruitment team within Eightfold as well, right? So while we are using this technology, right? So interestingly enough, when we look at the perspective, Eightfold adds enormous amount of ease of doing business. It changes the experience of hiring managers, of recruiters, of candidates, and it really adds value when it comes to, number one, changing the experience, improvement of efficiency, and driving strategic goals. So diversity need not be, a presentation that is made, to appease an audience. Certainly not. It's a very serious topic, which is extremely close to my heart. And, in the upcoming slides, I'm sure you will notice how we have used this technology to drive diversity, drive candidate experience, drive talent rediscovery. So the way it has already been evolved and is being used at State Auto, basically what they are doing is talent rediscovery. And the fact that, on day 0, the day you want to look for candidates, the algorithm can help you do that. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides.
Yeah. And Melanie, before we're going to go, section by, topic by topic here that we see currently on the right side of the screen. But are there any areas that you would really, focus? You mentioned the hiring managers getting a lot of benefit, but when it comes to automation, is there any place that, you're really seeing the value stand out?
Yeah, I think the selection process, the front end experience as well as the hiring manager experience and the whole workflow is where we've seen a lot of items stand out for us. The candidate shortlisting and stack rankings has really sped up the selection process and the screening process, allowing us to decrease our time to fill and to help retain top talent and not lose them to faster moving competitors. So all of that automation kind of plays into everything.
Yeah, well, and that's a great segue. You started with selection, and that's where we're going to start. Can you talk about maybe drill in a little bit more on selection and what that looks like for your hiring managers today?
Yeah, so how it works today is our managers get in and they calibrate their requisitions. Once they get in, the AI goes in using their deep learning and basically serves up all of our leads, all of our applicants in a stacked rank manner. So they can go in and look at, from the top to the bottom, they know where to start exactly. So they're not in there and they're not intimidated by the thousands of leads that they're seeing surfaced up. So it's really improved their efficiency.
So the system is looking both internally and externally, and providing that initial queue of candidates. Is that basically the simplified version of the
Yeah.
experience for them?
So day one, when they get in there and look at their leads, there will be thousands of leads based on how many you have in your ATS or your database already. So it's just serving them up immediately. There's no more searching or running reports to find leads that are already in your data warehouse.
Great. Okay. Okay. And Ashish, how does that compare to the rest of your customers, or what you're seeing in the market? I imagine one difference might be, and even you mentioned it at Eightfold, you've got recruiters. There's always this, intake process that most companies have of working with the hiring managers to get the requisition into the system, and in a manner that will drive results. Is Eightfold replacing that bit of the process everywhere, or is that unique to State Auto?
Yeah, so we have started uh, to build processes, in such a way that, like Melanie described, that you have to start with a calibration, right? Basically, setting a lane marker for the AI. So now imagine a state where we have set up a role library, right? Where a recruiter or a hiring manager, they just log on to the system, look at the role library, pick up the relevant role, which is pre-calibrated, which has a bunch of candidates, internal and external, that suit well with the requirements, right? And then they can start with the hiring process literally on day zero. So that would be nirvana for us. Now, today, if let's say I was a recruiter who's working on 25 requisitions and I have maybe 100 or 1,000 applicants for each role. Now imagine what's going on with that person's life. There are screening calls to conduct, intake meetings with business managers, reviews with their own bosses, salaries to negotiate with candidates, candidates to schedule for interviews, sourcing campaigns to initiate, and there are only so many hours in a day. Can there be a reliable system which is, telling the recruiter in an unbiased way, who are the top 10 or 15 candidates that they could consider for each role, and then basically help them engage with them all, right? And including and especially those who are getting rejected. So in terms of candidate engagement, while we do all our good work, it becomes super important. And as you see on the screen on the right hand side, telling the recruiters and the hiring managers why each candidate is relevant to that role. This becomes super important.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. Melanie, in your environment, is the I would imagine all of the requisitions, competencies, descriptions are all in Workday. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, so they pull over straight from Workday, and then they get calibrated within Eightfold.
Okay. Okay. And that calibration is all on the hiring manager's desk. And that's, so they're seeing the results change based on the different priorities that they weight within that calibration. Is that?
Yeah, as they go through and select their ideal candidates, internally or externally, as Ashish was saying, you can see real time the candidate population adjust and correlate to what you're selecting. We've found that the managers are extremely excited about the deep learning, and as they get into hiring more and more roles, it's happening basically automatically for them.
Right, right. And that's, and Ashish, that's not just based on that interaction with that job description, although I know that's a part of it, but I'm assuming that it based on the success of the process, right? The candidate profiles that, it's just one thing to calibrate on the front end, but then as we go through the process, the system is learning which candidates are getting interviewed and making it through the process. So on similar requisitions, the system has a more clear or a better view to fits for similar roles. Is that fair?
That's absolutely accurate. The algorithm is learning with every transaction. So who is getting hired, who is getting rejected, what was the calibration set at initially, how it changed, and the profiles of candidates which are getting updated continuously. The algorithm is even picking those from public data, right? And then is able to surface them up for the business managers and recruiters.
Yep. And that conversation about the calibration and how the system is learning is a great segue into the next topic, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's where I think a lot of the, as I mentioned earlier, pretty much everyone, 95% of companies are concerned with mitigating bias, from the hiring process. And that's irrespective of technology, right? But when we introduce this technology, there's a natural fear, and we see examples of it in the market where, if there's bias, is there bias built in? But at the same time, where there's an opportunity to interrupt bias early in the process and leverage the technology to be more inclusive. So I'm very curious, Melanie, to get your perspective on this. How do you see, the topic of DE&I at State Auto when it comes to talent acquisition, and how do you see the technology helping you?
Yeah, every voice matters at State Auto. We know that we can't become the very best without new ideas, fresh perspectives, and various backgrounds. And the diversity capabilities of the platform allow us to, like you said, mitigate biases early on throughout the candidate selection process and into the entire hiring experience. So, we have the capabilities of masking information so that you're not seeing specific demographic info. And then just serving up the talent based on the skills and things like that has really helped our managers, go through and sort out in an unbiased way where they need to begin.
Right. So I want to make sure that I come back to, the relationship between the ATS and the AI and the value here. So while you're capturing the data in Workday, that they're self-selecting on their way into the process for compliance purposes, but then as you move into Eightfold in selection and hiring process, that is then based on your criteria, you're only exposing what you feel is relevant to the process.
Yeah, that's correct, George. So we're only letting them see what we think is most relevant.
Okay. And Ashish, how does that compare? How do you see that same question around DE&I and how that's presenting itself across your customer base related to improving this, mitigating more bias out of the process, and becoming a more inclusive environment.
Absolutely, George. From what I notice in the professional world today, uh, more and more organizations are moving towards ensuring that they have, DE and I actually getting practiced in their hiring process. So with Eightfold, what we are able to enable our customers with is, number one, a statement that you can make in any forum, that my process for hiring is bias free, right? And that is done with the help of masking technology that's used at Eightfold. And we will look at this particular use case, right? Number two is the fact that you are able to track your data at a granular level at each stage of the hiring process. So even at sourcing, recruiter screening, hiring manager screening, and the various interviews up to the point of joining. You could drill down and see at a business unit level, at an LOB level, or even down to a hiring manager level as to what's been the diversity movement at each stage, right? Now when we say CVs are masked, and as you see on the screen, what really happens is that a hiring manager gets to see only a profile and not the actual CV of the candidate. And what does the profile have? It has only uh, the skills, qualification, and experience of of the candidate. And you would not see anything like the name or phone number, email ID, or LinkedIn ID, etc. Right? So once the interview process starts, obviously there is no need for masking, but you could track your data at a granular level and actually see which of your business managers are outperforming. And I mean, when it comes to change management in an organization, what I would love to recommend is we should make them rock stars. So those people who are standing out and ensuring that they practice what we preach, right? Those people need to be made, as the role models for the organizations. And that, I'm sure, will have a very resounding impact on DE&I.
Yeah, you've both touched on a few things that relate back to the platform behind this, whether it's the HRIS or the ATS, where having those KPIs that you're striving to reach around diversity and inclusion, taking the bias out, reporting. It really gets to reporting. And also there's a new, right now the market's abuzz because the SEC has just come out and said that if in your public statements, your 10Ks, you've stated, for example, that you're committed to diversity, then you have to prove it in your HR practices and your data. So this issue of compliance and reporting is a growing, even bigger issue when it comes to DE&I. And is that where, Melanie, do you see this data then feeding back into the system of record from a compliance reporting perspective, or does it sit in two places, or is it in Eightfold? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so currently it kind of sits in two places. We've actually found the reporting out of Eightfold to be a little bit more robust than what we have in our ATS.
Okay.
So we use a little bit of both.
Okay. And are you reporting on DE&I exclusively or say separately from the sort of standard compliance type reporting that we've done classically in HR?
Yeah, I would say it's something we're looking at individually.
Okay. So based on that internal goal that you have, and Ashish, is that reflective in your customer base as well? Are they, is compliance reporting happening in Eightfold, or is that sort of a marriage between the ATS and Eightfold?
So in most cases, I see the data being pulled directly off Eightfold because it's available at a very granular level. And it tells you about the diversity at each step, right? Which at times can be little um, tricky to mirror in the ATS, right? Wherever there is an integration which has gone with a bidirectional sync, there it works very well. And you know, in this use case, for example, what we are trying to do is trying to tell the business and the organization where exactly do they need to swing the needle to improve DE&I. So for example, if you see here, we are saying that only 20% of uh, uh, candidates are women in this particular example, right? Where at an L1 interview stage, you have women in the hiring process. Whereas towards the end, when you see that 28% have joined, it clearly means that if we were able to improve the, the diversity mix at the L1 interview stage, the organization could have done much better. Likewise, when you look at the percentage sourced, so one clear indication from this is that if the sourcing pipeline had done better, if we had more women at the entry point itself, at the sourcing stage, the organization could have done much better. So these kind of analytics and observations keep on getting exchanged between Eightfold and our customers, and eventually what it leads to is the desired outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great insights. I think I could spend the rest of the conversation on DE&I. It's so important, and it's I think as an industry, we're really just getting to the point where we're understanding how technology can really impact it. Our success in with diversity, but we have a bunch more topics to get through, and I want to keep us on track. And the next topic is around process enhancement, and this is where the conversation usually starts when we talk about AI and automation and efficiency. And that research that I mentioned we did at the beginning of COVID, about 56%, of the TA leaders saw this as the biggest benefit, but that's starting to change. It's still one of the top three, and we'll get into what the biggest benefits are. A little teaser there for the audience in the next couple of slides. What's emerging as some of the biggest benefits. But when it comes to process enhancement, Melanie, how does State Auto see AI, impacting process and efficiency internally there?
Yeah, we've definitely seen AI enhancing this process. It's one of the largest chunks that we've seen numbers reduce or, get better. Managers are now easily able to contact leads and have discussions with passive candidates, which leads to easy applicant conversions. Everything is happening quicker. They're in the same platform to make all their contacts. It houses all of their information. They're no longer having to go and dig through their inboxes and find candidate communications. So it's really just making their lives more efficient and easier. They're also able to move the candidate through the hiring stages, allowing them to contact, schedule, interview, and ultimately move them all the way to the offer process with ease now.
That candidate communication, scheduling, the transaction volume there is massive. And I talked to TA leaders in companies with as many administrators doing interview scheduling and driving communication as they have recruiters, and sometimes even more. So what can you drill in a little bit there? What does that look like? Is the system, where is the system doing the work for the hiring manager, and where is the system prompting when it comes to these types of transactions?
Yeah, so communication and scheduling, like you said, it used to be a major pain point for our managers. So they can easily get in there and just contact a lead or contact an applicant, see where they're at and start the discussions. So we have built-in templates in place within Eightfold, so they can just easily click contact, and then an email goes out. They can do all their communication that way. Everything is housed within Eightfold. When it comes to scheduling, we are on the Google platform. So the Google Calendar integrates, so they can easily just drop in, I'm available to interview between this time and this time, look in my schedule for any free times, and the applicant can then go back and forth and pick a time without having to have multiple conversations about it, and it just frees up all that time scheduling.
Yeah. Wow. And Ashish, how does that translate across your customer base? What kind of improvements in efficiency and process enhancement are they seeing?
George, we are noticing this across the board, right? Somewhere slightly more, somewhere slightly less, but across the board, we are seeing phenomenal improvements in terms of time to fill, which clearly means more revenue for our customers. Then when it comes to candidate engagement, I think, and especially like I mentioned earlier, the people who are getting declined, how you have that handshake with them at the end is so important for an organization, right? Then eventually all this will lead to a phenomenal amount of ROI, and many of our customers are finding their investments paid several times over, right? And one of the use cases can even be in terms of reducing redundancy, which can have an enormous impact on an organization, right? The piece that I mentioned earlier about was on diversity, right? And that is being stated in so many global forums as an important item in terms of improving an organization's revenue, right? So all of these metrics are moving north, and significantly so for our customers.
That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned communication, because when I think about candidate communication, on the front end, we've had what we've always referred to as, right, the black hole of, which candidates apply, and the communication just isn't there. But also on the back end, you mentioned those, whether they're silver medalists or just, at any point in the process rejected. That experience is important, especially if you're a consumer brand, or for, in the case of a silver medalist, a candidate that you might want to come back to. And that really gets into experience, just the tip of the iceberg on experience. And that's the area that we've seen in early COVID, pre-COVID. A lot of the value was, and still exists, on efficiency, but we're seeing TA leaders start to, the interest in leveraging AI for experience. It has doubled. It's gone from like 30%, or I'm sorry, 25% to 50%, just since the beginning of COVID in research that we've done. So I'm curious how this technology is impacting experience on both sides, but let's start with the candidate. Melanie, are there particular areas where you've seen improvements there for candidates as you've leveraged AI?
Yeah, like you said, we originally were looking at the candidate experience as a totally different endeavor. Once we were able to get in and see what Eightfold had to offer, it really meets all of our goals and all of our expectations. So one of our goals was a more user-friendly and branded candidate experience. Eightfold delivers the personalized career site, which has accomplished that goal for us. Candidates are now able to see their jobs that served up for them based on their resume and skills. What that does is it helps us to make sure candidates are applying for jobs that are more relevant for them. So it reduces the number of candidates applying for things sort of way out there, outside their scope of knowledge, which makes the recruiting process much easier as well.
That's great. And are you getting feedback from candidates as they come through the process? Have you had any of that along the way?
Yeah, so we've noticed that there has been a decrease in candidate drop-off throughout, while they're on our career side and the application process. So we know that the experience is going well for them based on that. We did receive some feedback from candidates saying that they thought the site was super easy to use, and there is a lot of branded content on there, and it really provides them all the information that they want to see without having to bounce back and forth to other state auto websites to check out our benefits or our perks or what else we have to offer.
Right, right. Oh, that's fantastic. And Ashish, what would you add to thinking about candidate experience and AI? Where are the opportunities?
Yeah. So the way I look at Eightfold's personalized career site is that, let's say I was a candidate looking for a job, right? And career sites across the world, typically you would find as difficult to navigate and very time consuming in terms of finding a relevant job if one exists in the first place on that career site. Now, what if the career site could engage with me intelligently and recommend relevant jobs to me if there was one matching to my profile? And that's where I guess Eightfold comes into play with a paradigm changing experience where the candidate gets to see not just recommended jobs by the AI, they also get to see the job insights as to why they are suitable for a certain role. And also at the same time, they are able to see prospective people that they are likely to be working with in case they were to join this team. Overall, from an experience perspective, this is clearly next level.
Yeah, it's the thought of personalization and how that front end candidate experience then impacts the overall machine learning and the experience on the hiring team side is really interesting to me. I want to pause for a second. We've got a couple of topics left to cover, and we'll transition to the other side of experience here. But I just want to remind everyone to get their questions in. I'm certainly holding back on many questions that I would have on any one of these topics, given the technology itself and the environment that State Auto and that Melanie's reflected. So please share those, and we'll get to as many as we can in the Q&A. But that the other side of experience, I think, is one of the biggest opportunities for talent acquisition. And we've been so focused on candidate experience for, 15 years, that the recruiter experience and the hiring manager experience, in many systems was overlooked. And it's obviously a big part of success in recruiting. So Melanie, how would you say this has been most impacted by implementing AI in addition to your current ATS?
Yeah, George, I think you're exactly right there. Our managers felt like they've been left in the dust for quite some time with, the ATS, and we're not looking at their experience. Well, this is a perfect example of something that's for them specifically. The platform is very user-friendly. It houses everything in one place. Managers are very pleased with the deep learning capability that we've seen from the AI, and they are commenting on that and the fact that their calibrations are getting smarter and they're having less and less work to do on the front end to get their jobs calibrated and ultimately start screening and getting into that hiring process. So this is exactly what they've been waiting for, and they're happy about it.
And I want to reinforce, when you stated the kind of hiring that you're doing, it's across the board. It's, the most, the highest level knowledge workers and also your, call center type hires. Like this is all of your hiring.
Yeah, that's correct. And we found it works beautifully for the variety of hiring that we're doing, from, like you said, call center all the way up to leadership.
That's great. That's great. And Ashish, how would you articulate the opportunities on the internal experience for the hiring teams with AI and with Eightfold?
George, I already envision talent acquisition to evolve into a talent experience management function, right? So whether it is the experience of hiring managers or candidates or HR business partners, I think that's where talent acquisition teams will evolve into. And the way Melanie has described it, the process becoming simple and easy. Imagine ourselves trying to book a cab maybe 10 years ago and getting told that, yes, they need at least 24 hours notice to ensure that a cab is at our doorstep, right? That doesn't happen any longer. And that is the experience that our businesses want. So day zero, if we are able to show relevant candidates to business managers, I think that's really going to have a big impact in terms of outcomes for the organization. So whether it is net promoter score, whether it is time to hire, or even diversity for that matter, right? If you look at all of these key strategic goals for an organization, all these get met with this technology.
Right. And it's important that you mention all of those because the experience, as a manager, what I'm expecting as an experience might be different than my peer. I may be leaning in on diversity because I've been challenged in my department. And so my net promoter score that I give you internally will be based on my experience with the system, helping me do that, helping me have a better experience and improving that metric. Or it may be time to hire, time to fill. These are things that will vary and at different times take on different levels, always a priority, but different levels of priority. So I really appreciate that you step back like that. Two more topics to cover. And the next one is an area, especially when we think about the ATS and the way it's been used. The topic of talent rediscovery is one that I've seen many talent acquisition leaders, it usually gets voiced as if we could only capitalize on, whether it's the money we've already spent or the database we've already built to rediscover talent. And I know that early on, Melanie, you mentioned this is, you're doing a lot of this. And so I'd love to hear about how you're doing that with the AI and how it's, and what the results are for you at State Auto.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we talked about earlier the ATS and the broad database of thousands of resumes and applications. So we know that they're there, but our hiring managers were not able to efficiently leverage all of that data from previous positions for current open requisitions. So now the AI serves them up immediately. So we talked about it earlier with those leads being in place and viewable and stacked ranked as soon as the requisition is calibrated. So now they can go in there. They don't have to run reports or search through the database anymore. Those leads are just served up right in front of them. So we're getting anywhere, between 1,000 to 3,000 leads, and these are people already in our database that we know match the skill set that we've already calibrated for. And the stack rankings help them. They're there. So the managers are not quite as intimidated. So going in there looking at, there's 2,000 people that might be right for this job. Some people might turn around. Well, the stack rankings really helps them to know where to start and to get going.
Right, and then that process that kicks off from there is the context is this is somebody who the system knows they've applied previously. The system has that record of experience. So that templated communication you referenced previously, it's a process that the context is not lost in that communication. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Well, that's great. And Ashish, what are the other opportunities that you see for talent rediscovery, leveraging AI and Eightfold?
So George, the way we look at data, and what we estimate that any organization would have a talent network, which is about 200 times the size of their overall headcount. So a company of, let's say, 10,000 people would have easily about 2 million folks in their talent network. Now, with that kind of a setup, it's important that we are able to serve up the most relevant candidates irrespective of the source. We are able to help business managers even run campaigns with selected pools. It could be current employees, it could be ex-employees, it could be people with certain specific skills, right? And have that constant engagement going on with this relevant population at any point in time. It's important to make sure that your candidates remain engaged at all points in time. And that's what Eightfold can help organizations with.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. The thinking about that universe of candidates that any organization has, that's and driving campaigns into that. That was always, I think, and I know because I was there when the ATSs moved to the cloud and adoption really picked up. That was always the promise of the ATS, but it was a bridge too far for the ATS because, again, those systems were driven by compliance and reporting, and not driven by what would be more rediscovery or marketing or CRM type capabilities into a database. So I think it's another, again, a really good example of that opportunity. And Melanie, do your hiring managers, when they go into the system, is that context even relevant for them, or are they just going into the system and they're not having to think about whether I'm doing talent rediscovery or looking for new candidates? Am I right in assuming that the system's really presenting the fit based on who's available?
Right. It's not a conscious thought. Well, let me go look at talent rediscovery. It's just served up right in front of them. They can start their search from that point and go forward. They don't have to think about other things that are top of mind as well.
Right. Okay. So if they've been through the process, and let's say, to pick up on some of the other topics, you've got candidates who, you've already been through that masking process. You've already been through that selection process. So dealing issues like diversity and so forth, we've already tackled some of that. And I'm further along in the process with candidates that have been vetted, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, our last topic is internal mobility, and this has certainly been a trend over the last couple of years. It's always been, from a talent management perspective, aspirational. We've got complete, platforms that have been built to quantify skills of existing employees and align them on a career path and train, provide learning and opportunities and guidance, along with matching to the right jobs that are available. And it's certainly picked up in the last 24 to 36 months as a trend, as some major employers have invested hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in this internal reskilling, and with the goal of internal mobility. And I know that Melanie, you had mentioned in our as we were preparing, that this is something that you're looking at for State Auto, but you're just at the beginning of that journey now. Is that right?
Yeah, reskilling, upskilling, those are all hot topics that we are looking into and more forward thinking. We know a majority of our talent, our best talent, is in-house. And so we look forward to having Eightfold help us harness all of that and go forward with our journey.
Yeah, and I think you're in good company. That's as much as this has been a really buzzy topic, the market has, well, there have been successes there. Most of the leaders that I talk to in the space are right where you are. They're looking to seize new technology, capitalize on new technology to seize this opportunity. So Ashish, I'm curious, how do you see AI and Eightfold impacting this for your customers?
George, again, I would delve into the paradigm changing experience.
Okay.
So if I was an employee earlier, who had been in my role for a few years, right, was beginning to get bored, perhaps, and unable to see any role changes within the team. Now, what happens in real life is that a great opportunity comes and goes by quietly before I could even realize. I could have been busy in some projects, or on leave, or traveling, or something. And what I would want is an intelligent system that would surface up relevant internal roles for me and engage with me. So this is, in my mind, the need of the employee. For the organization, it becomes super critical to ensure that their employees become reskilled, upskilled, based on what are the hot requirements and skills in the market. And on top of it, You also want them to be working on projects to enhance their skills and have that hands-on experience, which they would have otherwise lacked. So for the employees, the benefit clearly is that, uh, whether it is upward movement or lateral movement, they are able to have careers grow, and that's what I would look at them for. And for an organization, I think it's a huge statement to make to their employees that, guys, we love you, we care for you, we want to ensure that you will have a long career with us and not outside the organization. I think that is a clearly a huge impact that can be delivered through this technology.
And to the topic at hand today, sitting on top of that platform, right? That where all of the candidates have entered, the conversion through the hiring process, becoming an employee, that profile, that skills profile, talent profile is all there, and feeding the AI. And so it makes sense that this would be the next frontier, if you will, where we go with this technology, internally, since you've been, bringing the talent into the organization, now helping the talent find the next opportunity and impact retention for the employer. I really appreciate that. Okay, I want to stay on time. I want to get to some questions from the audience who have been extremely patient. Thank you both for so much of these insights. I could have drilled in for the entire time on any one of these topics, but let's go ahead and move on to questions from the audience. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here and sharing so much time with us today. Hello, Melanie. Thanks for coming up so quickly. We have Steve from Eightfold, who's also joining us here to answer some questions. We know we're on borrowed time, so we'll take a couple of questions here quickly. And Steve has been responding to questions in the Q&A tab. So if you ask them directly, you've received a one-on-one response from him. And what I'm going to do is kind of group some of these questions together for the panel, and almost like a consolidated quick Q&A. So the first question that came in, I think is really important, and it comes up a lot when we talk about AI. And I'll ask Melanie to go first and give us State Auto's perspective, but it's around context when looking at candidates. And I'm wondering from your hiring manager's perspective, from your perspective, and the technology overall, specifically when thinking about keywords and skills, and when a manager's looking for a particular something, how have you found the system in understanding the broader context of the candidate?
Yeah, we've had some great results from our managers. They're saying that the system doesn't just look at that specific keyword, but more or less, the context that's around it. And it's even going further than that and looking beyond that and saying, well, we know that this job title generally has these sets of skills behind it. So even if they're not listing out all those keywords that you might be looking for, the system knows, and it's realizing this.
And now, did you go through a process of building that taxonomy, or because this is AI, did the system learn, or a little of both?
It's a little bit of both. So in the beginning, they were finding, they had to learn how to use the system as well. So once they figured it out and we start using the platform more and more and more, the deep learning is getting more evolved as we go on, and it's learning without us even doing anything.
Yeah. And Steve, as the product expert, what would you add to this? I saw your answer. I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, but around that question of context and versus keywords.
Yeah, absolutely. The AI understands context as well as the word itself. So an example I always love to give is a resume may have the word Java on it. And this could be an engineer who knows the programming language Java, or it could be a barista who works at the Java Hut coffee shop down by the beach. So it's very important for the context to understand that. a keyword search would not work, which is maybe why certain searches don't seem to work very well. But with AI, that is not an issue. And if you've ever used Google and compared it to a non-keyword search engine, you can see, non-AI search engine, such as we used to have before Google came along. You can understand the difference.
Yeah, that's a great example, the Java example. Another question that I think is great while we have a customer, a user of the technology. And by the way, that first question was from Mark. Another question that came up from Nishith was about, I believe it was Nishith, about the gap that you really see the AI filling. Where are the big gaps that the AI is filling in comparison to the ATS? And then I'll add another question that came in that's associated and the business value. Sort of if you can lean in on maybe the impact, the business impact, or I'll say ROI, but we didn't do an ROI study on this. I don't expect you to throw metrics around, but if you have any, that's great. And I'll start with Melanie.
Yeah, for us, the ATS, we still have it. We still use it as our system of record. We found the gaps that Eightfold was able to fill for us were the stack rankings. So managers are gaining just enormous amounts of efficiency. We recently had a manager say that they are going through resumes and spending 75% less time now than they were before. And that number is massive for us. So to be able to give all that time back to our managers is incredible.
Yeah, efficiency, as we said in the conversation, was what I've seen in the research. It's the sort of one of the top two in driving the selection of this type of technology. Steve, what other areas? I guess what other gaps do you see being filled, and what value do you see coming from those capabilities?
Efficiency is a big area, as Melanie mentioned. You may look at it different ways depending on what your organization cares about. We find that our customers are saving somewhere north of 50% of the hours required in recruiting. That's pretty typical. As a big part of this efficiency gain then comes back to time to fill as well. From the day the requisition was opened, how long did it take to get an offer accepted? And we often see benchmarks around a 1/3 time savings there. There's a lot of process that you can't get rid of course, and that's very important to hiring a person. But then that time is dramatically accelerated due to the efficiency and automation. And a big area as well is in diversity hiring, increasing hiring of diversity groups that matter to the business. Now, this is going to be very variable based on what the organization cares about. But we do see that as well. And Ashish had earlier shared an example from another one of our customers.
Yeah. And I want to, Ashish isn't here, pass on our thanks to him for, he couldn't stick around for the Q&A, but I wanted to, one last question, and I'll let you take this wherever you'd like to go with this, but there was, I think these are relevant. There were there was some reaction in the chat around State Auto, as expected, not having any recruiters, any sourcers, any schedulers. And I would point out again that that's one model, and that doesn't one size doesn't always fits all. But and then there were a lot of questions about does this, not just about the ATS, but does it replace digital interviewing, or would it, how does it work with assessments? And so I think the natural place that we go is like replacing things with AI. But Melanie, how have you found some of the additive or where is it complementing your ATS? You still have Workday on the back end. So I'll put that there for you, and we'll let Steve after give the tech provider's perspective on that. But as a customer, how do you see that all playing out?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely allowed us to, like I said, we're in a unique spot where we don't have recruiters. It allowed us to, upskill and reskill those positions and put them in different places throughout our organization. We still utilize the ATS for all of our process-related functions, the cross-functionality between payroll and finance. So all that information still feeds back and forth bidirectionally. So it's still saving efficiency gains there, and we're still utilizing it as a system of record.
Yeah, that's great. That's great perspective. And Steve, I know you have a lot of partners, so you are augmenting each other in many cases. So can you add on to that?
Yeah, so absolutely, the ATS still has an important role to play, and there are many things that the system of record that Workday provides, also beyond the ATS, that AI is not designed to do. Now, our customers, I'll say, Melanie, you are a little bit unusual in not having recruiters, so you're not the only ones. We do also see some of our customers use just Eightfold in addition to their ATS. Some also use video interviewing technologies. Some also use assessments. And so they're using other tools as well that they would like to keep within their hiring workflow. We do find that some of our customers have been able to now layer Eightfold on top to do everything from that point of requisition all the way to the point of offer, and take it all the way off of the ATS platform onto Eightfold and do everything in between.
Yeah, that's great. Now I'm looking at the time, and some folks have stuck around for an hour and 10 minutes. That's amazing. Thank you all for giving us your time here. It's been such a pleasure to work with Eightfold, and Melanie. I've really enjoyed working with you through this whole process and helping you tell your story and helping tell the Eightfold story as well. Thank you, Steve. And this webcast will be available on demand at unleashgroup.io. There will also be a summary written up. So any questions that we didn't get to, the editorial team at Unleash will, in writing that article, will coordinate with us and get some answers and perspective to share in that article. So keep an eye at Unleash. And thank you again. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody. And we'll close out and really appreciate the added time today.